Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the channel. It's been a minute, but I'm here. I am unstoppable. The train will never stop. As long as Yu-Gi-Oh is around, there's going to be a dueling wave to criticize it. On this channel, we love to go in on Yu-Gi-Oh. We criticize constructively so that we can open up discussions that can hopefully lead to fruitful results and change in this hypothetically great game. Usually, in recent videos, we've discussed why this game is trash and has so many issues and it's disgusting and this is a problem, that's a problem, everything's a problem, and how these problems need immediate fixing and how we can do to fix them and or what we can do to fix them. But today, we're going in a different direction. But before we get up in that time, I just want to bring your guys' attention to the channel Discord, baby. We've had a Discord for a minute now. It's growing, solid community. We've got almost 40 members right now. So please join. Our community is small, but engaging. And we even have a community-controlled ban list that we're trying to get off the ground. We have the first iteration. We're going to do voting for the next set of hits for the May edition of the ban list. So please get into the Discord. Check it out. Get to voting. So you can suggest cards. That's why it's a community-controlled ban list. And we'll all vote on it. So if you'd like to try Yu-Gi-Oh in a new, interesting way, where Konami doesn't need to have say in your own home, well then, come join this, because this is called Democratic Yu-Gi-Oh. Ew, democracy. Anyway, back to the video.
You win.
Omni negates are slowly being phased out of the game. With the banning of cards like Baron de Fleur and Borreload Savage Dragon, we see Konami put the final nail in the coffin of negate Yu-Gi-Oh that has been in the process of being phased out for a long time. The modern era has been known for decks that make varied interrupts that are not Omni negates. They're more pops, banishes, removal, just, random interesting ways of interacting with your opponent. The exception in the modern era has been the Snake Eyes deck from the Phantom Nightmare format, exclusively, before the most recent ban list, where the deck would have the advantage of modern Yu-Gi-Oh, which is snowball, crazy advantage, have crazy follow-up, but also be able to easily make, thanks to Jet Synchron and the Snake Eyes engine, to make negates like Borreload, Savage Dragon, and Baron on the same turn, effectively giving them two really strong negates that can stop almost anything that can threaten their board. And then on top of that, they have another like 4 or 5 interrupts. That, with the most recent ban list, has changed. Konami has been changing that for a while, the Snake Eyes being the exception to the rule. Top decks in the game currently are Snake Eyes with no Omni negates, Fire King Snake Eyes, which also doesn't have any negates, but it can make boards of 7 to 9 interrupts. You got Voiceless Voice, which makes a Protect the Castle style board, backed up by 1 Omni negate. The reason it has this is because of its own protection. It doesn't actually like to use the negate on a play for you, something that you're going to go off with. It uses it so that if you have a massive board breaker or blowout card, it protects their board, while their other cards work in tandem to protect their boss monster and low and whatnot. Branded, which makes no negates whatsoever, unless you count the blazing brightest branded BBBBB King, Cash, Lab, etc., etc. They just don't make negates. To find a deck that focuses on making multiple negates, you have to go back to maybe Phantom Knights, and that deck was never real. It was a solid rogue pick. Another one is maybe the Naturia Runic deck from like 2+ years ago, which really didn't rely on Omni negates, but it did hit spells and it could do infinite spells, which was very oppressive. But other than that, I don't really see what decks in the game exclusively relied on Omni negates, multiples and multiples. Even the best pre-Snake Eye decks like Rescue A's, Unchained, both did not rely on Omnis. Tier Laments was a solid deck in those formats, and because of its, because of its insane power ceiling nature and the ability to mill crazy and the ability to run some random graveyard garbage, they could make Baron and possibly a Toad, but that deck was never really the best deck in the game in those formats. The decks like Unchained, Rescue Ace, etc., they had some negates, but those negates were much more palatable. If we go into most recent formats, you've got decks like Sprite, Dragon Link, Chimera, Rika, Vanquish Soul, Super Heavy, Centurion, Infernoble, Marincess, Sword Soul, Math Mech, Mekanko, Furhire, Salamangreat, Orchist, Manadium. I guess Manadium, right? Manadium is a negate deck. But you see how many decks there are out there that don't rely on negates. Manadium was actually a it was a change of pace compared to the other stuff. That's why Vanadium felt so oppressive, because it felt like it was just playing a whole different game, because it was that old style but with newer cards. This is something that 99% of players can get behind, with the other 1% being participants of the BME Pain Olympics. Omni negates end up being super no skill if there are 3+ on your board, or are the only form of interruption. It's not interesting, it's not fun. To the opposing player, they're essentially an FTK if their deck can't produce a hand of like 6 starters/extenders with maybe some board breakers in there too. And they're one of the main reasons going second in Yu-Gi-Oh! Became such a slog. Luckily, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Though, especially with the banning of Barone and Savage, we're at a spot where the only examples left of these Omnis are specific archetypal ones, which are very, very targeted, which are very easy to manage, because those decks, archetypal negates, they can't really cross-pollinate into other decks. Now, what does this mean? You know, when the game gets out of its own way, finally, and you and your opponent don't get FTK'd by some BS, and you and your opponent can actually enter into a nice back and forth that expands past turn 4, then the game, honestly, is a treat to behold. It feels like you're in the anime slinging cards back and forth. Both players trying to find the tiniest little advantage where the draw of a single card can swing things to either side. Real quick. Story time. I'm playing Branded Best deck, and my buddy plays Sword Soul. We entered one of these back and forth games. I go first, do the standard Aluburn to B-Fuge, which promptly gets ashed. I pivot and end on Querdis using the Fright for Engine and a set Branded in red. He goes, does the Sword Soul thing, making 2 level 8s through my interrupts and removing Querdis from the field, triggering its effect, which floats into a Fallen of Albaz, giving me Mirror Jade, which clears his board at the end of the turn, on top of the Mirror Jade already banishing a card and whatnot. I draw, make a fusion using my Patchwork Engine, don't remember exactly which one, and get in for some damage. Some of the details here are fuzzy because it's been a minute since this duel. That's why I can't go into like the perfect details. But he proceeds to make Barone, LOL, bye-bye Barone, and then out my monster and get in for damage. I chain one of my effects, which gets negated, and he doesn't have much left except for a vanilla Barone that can turn into something next turn, because he can reborn any monster from his grave using its effect on standby. I draw for turn. I've got 1 dead card in hand and nothing on the field. The card I rip off the top is Aluber, the Jester of Despia. Are you kidding me right now? NANI? I was floored. I literally almost fell out of my chair. The one card that could save me, I ripped right into it. I felt like Yugimoto himself. I dropped that sucker down so hard onto the field that I'm pretty sure I cracked the wood. I felt like Yugi when he dropped Exodia in episode 1 against Kaiba. And I ended up winning the game. Post-win, I sat there and I was like, get out of town. In modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't really have these moments anymore. You would have them before, because the game would keep going and keep going and keep going. And eventually it would just give you the chance of like lucking into some variants like I just did. But we don't have that anymore. We have guy goes first, makes oppressive board. Guy goes second. Does he have anything that can break board? No. We scoop, go to next game, so we don't give him intel. Or we do have some stuff that can break his board. We break his board and then OTK him. Right? There's no in between. There's no, oh, we're going to go to turn 3, go to turn 4, go to turn 5, all this different stuff. The only time turn 3 happens is if the turn 2 player goes, you know what, I'm going to try go into this board. They overestimate how much they actually have. They get negated into all hell. And then it gets back to the turn 1 player on turn 3. And then he just ends up killing the opponent because he has so much advantage and so much damage readily available. But when the game goes past that turn 3 is when the game still shines, when it's still old Yu-Gi-Oh! Right? What we've just messed up in recent years is the power creep has gotten so hammer time that we don't have these moments anymore. And the game becomes very formulaic in a way. It's, you know, it's why you see deck builders go, make a perfect formulated list with 3 of this, 3 of this, 3 of this, 3 of this, because optimally consistency and all that, which are very important things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not whitewashing that. But what ends up happening is, because of that need for consistency, squeezing out every little percentage points for victory, what ends up happening is Konami makes these decks better and better to combat the old stuff. The power creep naturally progresses to the point where so many actions are done in one turn that each turn now has more actions than 2 or 3 turns did a few years ago. But the problem with that is you've spent everything in 2 turns. You don't have the ability to luck into some card or get into a solid grind game where you can, you know, whittle down your opponent. That happens in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's, what would happen? Maybe a conservative estimate would be 2 out of 10 times, and I don't even know if it's that many times. When this is in full swing, there's literally no better game on the market. So please, Konami, capture this feeling, bottle it, and make profit. That is the easiest way you can make profit.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Yu-Gi-Oh is ruled by varied and unique archetypes. I know some games have something similar like Card Fight Vanguard, but there's nothing like archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh. To have a theme that has a unique art style, a unique play style, that those two interact with each other and feed off of each other. I mean, it's just perfection. Just think about your favorite deck and how that archetype and its play style mimics its art and vice versa. Comment down below your example, because I want to hear about all of the countless examples in the game that are not even coming to my mind right now. Look at a deck like Unchained. Fiends locked away into prisons that are destroyed, then those fiends are promptly released. Their traps and spells serve as essentially as prisons that hold them, and then when a card is activated that destroys that prison, then those things summon themselves from the deck. So you see how the artwork and the playstyle interact with each other, right? Obviously, is it perfect one-to-one? No, because in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh, you need a lot of your cards to have the same effect. So are some of those cards that you can pop for Unchained prisons? No, but you kind of get the understanding when you see Abominable Chamber, how that artwork and that card effect translates so well. Also, the main deck monsters have a similar effect because the whole archetype needs to have a cohesive playstyle, but still, you see how that all works together. It's amazing. On top of that, they combine their powers and make powerful link monsters where one of the twins will stay normal form and then the other one will turn into a large monstrous dog creature that works with the human demon form of the other twin. And if you look at the artworks, you see them. So it's like one of them has changed, the other one stayed. And then on the other artwork, the other one changed and the other one stayed the same. So it's really, really cool. Also, there is the big dog too, who turns into the giant abomination. Or decks like Purely, where each quick play spell summons a different extra deck monster, like the evolution stones in Pokemon, right? Delicious Memory summons Plump. Pretty Memory summons Beauty, right? And that's so interesting, right? Like, and they all have different effects and different uses. Or the Albaz lore. I mean, guys, we know how much we like Branded on this channel. Look at those effects. Look at the fusions. I mean, this goes all the way down to even the way the materials are listed. When you see cards like Albalanitus, Lubellion, they literally have reverse materials because the Albaz is the second part of the fusion. He's not the main guy in the fusion, right? That's supposed to be a Luber. Not to get too deep into the Brandon story, those are basically self-evident. Anyone can see what I mean there. We also have older examples back in like Duelist Alliance format of Infernoid, Burning Abyss, Necros. This is where kind of these fusions of artwork and effect really started to go together. I know there were earlier examples, but this is where it was really prevalent. Things like Ritual Beast, which are, you know, they work with the other like dimension essentially, and so they work with the Banish Zone. You know, Necros using the armors of dead guys to equip themselves, to give themselves powers, right? That's really interesting. And then they get the effects of those monsters that they equip their armor, right? And it's a ritual deck, which meaning like they use the armor as to perform the ritual. Like, that's so interesting. Burning Abyss, right? It works. They're fiends, demons. We're in the underworld. What's the underworld equivalent in Yu-Gi-Oh? Oh, it's the graveyard, right? Dante, this being based off the Divine Comedy, Dante's trying to save his girlfriend Beatrice. He's fighting against the demons. He sends the demons to the graveyard. The most degenerate things in Yu-Gi-Oh, other than negates, are hand rips, floodgates, FDKs. I'm sure I'm missing something, but those are some of the most like annoying things to deal with in this game. I'm happy to say that in today's Yu-Gi-Oh, there are very few decks that rely on those strategies. Konami has changed their philosophy almost entirely on banning and limiting broken, unfun cards. This is something that should be commended because these cards were so overtuned and just truly don't do anything for the game, like for the game's health. When a card has one line of text, you know it's busted. Thankfully, shout out to them, credit where credit is due, because we can't just hate, we're gonna be fair here. They're finally hitting these broken floodgates. The thing that everyone has been asking for so long. They're hitting it. How long have we been begging for anti-spell to be banned? I know it wasn't banned, it was limited, but still. How long? 10 years? Summon limit. Summon limit became broken in the time of Eldritch, right? And people realize it's disgusting. It needs to be addressed too. They hit summon limit, which no one in their would have ever thought that would be hit. Because overall, it's not a good going second floodgate, right? Cards like Rivalry, Gozen, those cards were hit because they were really good going second also. Yu-Gi-Oh! Ultimately has a lot going right, and I just wanted to say that because I don't want the channel viewers to believe that I'm a pessimist. If you guys like this video, check this one out. It's pretty good, and you don't want to miss out. Huh? The FOMO setting in? Click it now. Click it now. As always, thank you for watching, and see ya!